Today's video we're going to be looking into, will the rise of electric cars mean electricity prices are going to increase dramatically because the national grid will not be able to cope with all this extra peak demand, so everyone's electric prices will go up regardless if they have an electric car or not, and electric cars fueling will cost exactly the same as petrol. This is of course total rubbish, so let's look into why that is. Now, electricity prices here in the UK can change all the time. Now, if you're an Agile customer in the UK, you'll know they change every 30 minutes, but prices do change even more than that. Your electricity company are constantly bidding on different electricity prices, minute by minute, day by day. And demand and supply are two separate things that change the prices here in the UK. Now, first of all, supply will change depending on if there's lots of wind or solar or if there's a power plant down. That completely can change the supply. Demand can change day by day for so many things. A biggest example, a big football game on, a big soccer game on, a big rugby game is on, and half time is called. Everyone tends to, in the UK, go and put their kettles on, and that increases demand. So that's what we call random demand. But demand, what we do know, which is very, very, very easily predictable, is what we call peak demand. Now, peak demand here in the UK is 4 till 7 p.m. So that's 4 p.m. till 7 p.m. And that is because it's the time that most of us come home from work and we turn our ovens on, we turn our kettles on, and we've come home from work and we start relaxing. Now, some people will also come home and plug their electric car in. And if you're going to just plug your electric car in every time you come home and want it to charge immediately even though you don't need it, you will definitely start to pay more for electricity as the future comes on. You won't pay more than what a petrol or diesel car costs to fuel, but if you're willing to switch your demand, you will definitely make some savings. If you're willing to shift your electric charging from outside the peak, now if you're just turning your oven on, the grand scheme of what you're going to use between 4 and 7 electric is very small. But if you're plugging an electric car in, using those high-powered devices, even multiple EVs, if you have 2 EVs in your household, that will use quite a lot of electric, and you will definitely see yourself paying more in the future. I can see more and more electricity companies going towards a dynamic pricing-based system, a bit like Octopus, for just 4 till 7 pricing. Everywhere else, all the other times will be fine, there'll just be a set price, but I reckon 4 till 7 we're going to start seeing electricity companies implement some kind of higher charge system for those times. And if you're going to charge between those times, you will likely pay a lot more depending on what the supply to the grid is at those times. But if you're willing to move out of those peaks, you will definitely pay a lot less than you are even paying now. I mean, for example, on Octopus Agile, I've seen them pay negative rates. That means they pay me to charge my car. I've even seen that quite often prices below 2p on a 3 or 4 day basis if there's been lots of wind. If you're thinking of joining Octopus Agile, Octopus Go, any of the Octopus Go deals, any of the Octopus deals, then click down below at my link. You'll get £50 for signing up, and so will I, which helps build my electric car channel and helps me bring more videos like this to you. Prices of electricity have actually fallen. Now, most people in their actual pocket have seen prices go up, and that is for a couple of reasons, mainly because electricity companies are greedy as a general rule and they put prices up, and the price cap has been coming down, apart from recently because of coronavirus. Due to people not paying bills, they put the price cap up. But traditionally, prices of electricity have been falling, and the reason they've been falling is not because of lack of demand, it's actually because of more wind and solar generation coming on the national grid. Wind and solar are the cheapest forms of electric generation pretty much all over the world. You cannot get cheaper electricity than wind and solar plants. So if you put a wind turbine in, a solar plant in, you are going to generate electricity far less than other forms of generation. In fact, nuclear, for example, very, very, very expensive form of generation, because not only do they have to build an expensive plant, run an expensive plant, they also have to decommission an expensive nuclear waste dump. It's all extremely expensive and extremely costly. So the cheapest form is a nice little turbine they can put up, spins around, goes wrong a couple of times, they repair it, they're great. Now, you've probably heard recently in Texas, they had their turbines freezing up, and that is because of climate change. Climate change is a thing that loads of people like to deny, but Texas were not planning on seeing these minus temperatures, so they did not fit what they call little heaters on their turbines. Now, some turbines, especially in colder climate countries, they have a little heater to ensure that they don't freeze up like they do in Texas. And I imagine that Texas will be going down the same route and installing these little heaters on their turbines. So don't worry, turbines will not start freezing. There is plenty all over the North Sea of England. There's plenty in Norway, which is much colder than Texas. Now, because of wind and solar, like I said, prices have been falling. But as we come to the end of a lot of nuclear power sites here in the UK, for example, we're going to have to start investing in new generation. Now, this may be wind or solar. It could be battery storage with wind and solar. But at the moment, the UK government are going towards building a new nuclear power plant, which will mean an overall higher strike price. Now, this would happen regardless of us having electric cars. They were going to build this regardless. And demand in the UK has been steady. It's not increased, it's not decreased, and that's because most of us have more energy deficient devices in our home, LED bulbs, more energy efficient washing machines, dryers, etc. And because of this, we are not seeing massive increases in electric demand. But because of we're having more wind and solar on, we are having less stable, predictable parts, because wind is not all the time. It does happen a lot here in the UK. We are the windiest place in Europe, but wind is not extremely predictable. So we're going to need some battery storage or some other form to meet the peak, that line of basically of constant use of electricity. And that's going to be having to be put in regardless of having electric cars or not. The advantage of wind and solar is if there's lots of it, there's too much of it, electric cars are a great way of soaking up all this power in one method, one really quickly. And that's how, for example, Agile works, by paying you cheaper electricity price to soak it all up. So I think we're going to see a lot more energy companies go towards these dynamic systems, but a lot of them are scared to do it now because they're quite happy to charge you a set fee for quite high electricity and let them themselves make the money out of when these price drops happen. Firstly, if we are not refining all this petrol, there is going to be an absolute ton of electricity available on the grid. And that is because to refine 1 gallon of fuel will power the most average EV 20 miles. 1 gallon of fuel uses enough electricity to power an electric vehicle 20 miles. So if we're not refining that 1 gallon of fuel, an EV can go 20 miles. Now, if you think of, if we stopped all refinery here in the UK, for example, that's a lot of EV miles. Then if you think about the other forms of electricity used for petrol refining, for example, all the office stuff, all the exploratory, all the distribution of getting it to sites, you have to fill up an oil tanker with the fuel that you then have to transport it to petrol stations. There is so much wasted fuel. So if you then stop refining it and then put it straight into electric cars, there's going to be extreme uses of power there that we can save for then putting in EVs. So as we see EVs increase and fuel demand decrease, what we'll actually see is a balancing out of power distribution. EVs are a gateway to being green. And what I mean by that is a lot of people will buy an electric car with no interest in the environment, and some people will with a slight interest in the environment. But whichever these two people are, or whichever two camps you sit in, when you have an electric car, you suddenly realise that you want to be a bit more green. And it's a weird effect that I've seen everyone do, even people who have no interest in the environment whatsoever, who buy an electric car just purely because they're cheaper to run, realise that you can stick solar panels on your roof and generate electricity for free. For free! Because solar panels are, yes, there's a cost to install them, but the payback on them, if you've got an electric vehicle to put that electricity in, is really fast. I mean, really fast. And then if you look at battery storage utilities that you can have, so you could have battery storage in your home, not only charging from the solar panels, but then could charge into your EV, or even being used with solar. We could also have a battery, and then also some dynamic charging system like Agile, pulling cheap electricity, charging the battery, and also the battery on the car, and then discharging back to the house. There is so many ways that we can generate and save more money, and the EVs are a gateway to making people get these technologies. So if more people get EVs, it says that more people will likely get solar and home battery storage units, therefore relieving more peak off the grid, increasing generation on the grid. And I honestly do think that people will think more smartly about how they use their power if they can see that they can make more savings, more money from basically generating their own power. Now, EVs have their own solution for this, and this is V2G, vehicle to grid. Now, at the moment, the only vehicle to grid system that you can get at the moment is a CHAdeMO car. And if you don't know what vehicle to grid is using the onboard battery on your vehicle as a home battery, so you can charge off the grid and then you can discharge the grid. Now, one way that you could do this is you could charge up at night on what we call low peak, cheap electricity, being paid or even taking it from the grid at, you know, a pence, 2 pence, and then we could use that vehicle to discharge the grid during peak, maybe being paid up to 30 pence per kilowatt hour to discharge it back. So you could make a profit of way over 20 pence per kilowatt for just basically leaving your vehicle plugged in all the time and letting control of the smart systems depending on what the demand and fluctuations are on the grid. And many people are doing this already now. It's not, you know, impossible to do. Some people are doing it with home battery storage units, some people are doing it with vehicle to grid solutions, and I do think that we'll see more vehicle to grid solutions coming on board. Now, CCS is capable of vehicle to grid systems, but I'm going to hedge my bets that we're going to see a vehicle to grid system that just uses Type 2 socket, using the AC onboard systems on the car to do vehicle to grid without any big expensive charger, DC chargers on your wall. I reckon we're going to see it all built into the car. And one company I know that has been working and developing on this is the Renault Zoe, for example. I do know that they have test systems, beta systems using a vehicle to grid system just like this. Now, I'm currently reviewing a range of smart electric vehicle chargers. And the reason I say they're smart is they are connected to the internet, and we could do so many things to help balance the grid and ensure that we have stable prices for coming years and years and years ahead. And one way we could do that is we could sign up to certain energy tariffs and give them control of our smart meter, or our smart chargers, more to the point. So what we do is we let them control our smart chargers, and that means turning them on and off depending on grid demand. Now, this might actually only transmit to you as being off for a minute, 30 seconds, 2 minutes. It might just be that the national grid needs to turn off a load of EV chargers because they're running out of demand at that particular point. They need to fire up another power plant to start running or generating electricity, and until that generation comes through, they just need to turn a few chargers off. And they could do that, and then that's what I imagine they're going to start doing. They could also see the possibility that there is not enough electricity being used on the grid. In other words, they have too much generation. They don't want to turn off a turbine because they're expecting a peak to, you know, come soon, because they know that someone maybe football game's finishing soon, and they don't want to turn that plant off because they're just going to turn it straight back on. So they might want to turn your charger on if your car's plugged in. And having these total control of your charger may actually benefit you in lower average electricity costs, because what's likely going to happen is we're going to see more inventive tariffs where they're going to pay you to turn off your charger and pay you to turn it on, which means that we're going to see more dynamic pricing, more dynamic loading. But I do think that we will see more of this. And this is not just because we're having more electric cars on the road. You know, if you want to charge your car all the time and you don't care about anyone else and you always want it charged, but you don't want to risk it being turned off for 30 seconds because you really need some mileage that literally won't exist in a 30-second period. If you're that person, fine, just charge. You don't have to go on one of these smart tariffs. These smart tariffs are to empower you, to give you cheaper prices. Those people that want to charge all the time, they can just pay more. It's fine. Now, with all these technologies I've mentioned, I really do think that we are going to see stable prices for long term, especially if you're willing to move to more smart tariffs. I actually think that you're going to see a dramatic decrease in your price. If you're one of these people that just likes to remain on a standard tariff that's the same price every single day I reckon that you'll see a small increase over the couple of years, going up and up and up. And eventually I do think that we'll see more companies introducing a peak, maybe a peak penalty for using electricity at certain times if you're not on a dynamic tariff. But if you move to a dynamic tariff, I don't think that the peak demand prices will be that much. And this is going to be coming for years and years to come. And if you're not on a smart meter, I imagine that people on non-smart meters will pay a higher price than people on smart meters. And that's because they can't predict your usage as well and when you're using it. And it just basically makes it more complicated for energy companies to work. These smart meters are to empower us and to empower the electricity companies to basically use our data better to predict usage better. And it should transmit into cheaper prices for all of us. And I, for one, have switched to Agile and I have seen my prices drop. And if you're willing to move your prices, which, believe it or not, saving a couple of pence per kilowatt is quite a lot when you stack it up over a year. And people like me will move their energy for cheaper electricity. It's been proven by Agile. If you want to sign up to Octopus, click the link down below. You'll get £50 for signing up. Now, I'm not saying that electricity prices will never cost the same as a petrol or diesel cost for filling up, because they probably will with inflation over the next 50 years and the way that everything's going. But how much would a petrol car cost when you consider that 20 kilowatt hours of power could have powered that EV for a couple of gallons? In fact, I've got the exact figure here. The exact figure which was quoted is 1 gallon of fuel uses 5 kilowatt hours of electricity. So to make 1 gallon of fuel is 5 kilowatt hours of electricity, which I think is a lot, really, personally. Thank you very much for watching this week's video, and I'll see you again next week. Goodbye.